So I don't think that this needs to be explained to some of you, but just in case you didn't know, Donald Trump was not at all a peaceful president, an anti war president. Not at all. No. He just did what any other president would have done, any other establishment president would have done, and that is to ramp up the wars that we have started, continue the legacy of US imperialism. George W. Bush ramped up what Bill Clinton was doing, and Obama ramped up what George W. Bush was doing by getting us into more wars than we were already in under George Bush. And Donald Trump, although he didn't start any new wars, that doesn't make him a anti-war president. He increased the drone strikes. And this idea that he's a peace candidate just because he's pulling troops out of Afghanistan is complete and utter BS. Because even if the amount that he pulled out is so insignificant that Joe Biden can just put them back in when he becomes president. What Donald Trump did was a half measure. He did not do a full withdrawal. And of course, the mainstream media was criticizing him for pulling troops out. And they never criticized him when he was ramping up the wars. So I'm sure that a lot of you aren't like this, but there are a handful of people out there who believe that because the Democrats are so corrupt that they need to support Trump and the Republicans. But we saw that happen with people like Anomaly and H.A. Goodman. And though Trump is a political outsider, he is still going to do the bidding of the establishment. And again, after 4 years, we're still in all these wars that we were in during the Obama presidency, plus more drone strikes. So if you vote for the Republican Party, you're going to receive the same criticism that I give people who keep voting for the Democratic Party. You're voting for more war. You're voting for more establishment fuckery. It's not harm reduction to vote for an establishment party. Harm reduction would be to educate the masses of what the establishment is doing, organizing, building communities, and building strong movements. So I was watching a video by Robert Inlakesh. I want to give him credit. He is a reporter for The Last American Vagabond. And he was reporting how apparently most of the violence in Afghanistan is done by the U.S. coalition forces more than the Taliban. I want to also remind people, in case they forgot, that under Trump's administration, it was one of the 3 administrations that was reported in a leak that was reported on by the Washington Post. One of the few times that they did something good, very, very few times, showing us how they were lying to us. The Trump administration, Obama, Bush, they were lying to us about what we were doing in Afghanistan. And that many people there, many military officials had absolutely no idea what we were doing. So this is an article that Robert Inlakesh reported on in his channel, and I want to report it for you guys here, for my audience. This is from the Middle East Eye, and it says that Trump's airstrikes in Afghanistan dramatically increased civilian deaths report. So the article mentions that in 2019, airstrikes from U.S. and its allies in Afghanistan killed 700 civilians, more than in any other year since the beginning of the war in 2001 and 2002, according to the new research from Brown University's Cost of War project. And so just like I'm going to have that article linked in the description, I'm also going to have this study linked in the description for you guys to read for yourselves. It provides a lot of figures and details some of the history of what we're doing in Afghanistan. It shows us the statistics of civilians that have died throughout the years in Afghanistan as a result of U.S. airstrikes and Afghan Air Force airstrikes. So going back to that Middle East Eye report article, it says that the new data casts light on U.S. President Donald Trump's aerial warfare policies across the Middle East and countries neighboring the region, which have become less restricted and more opaque. The report chronicled the number of civilian deaths in Afghanistan from U.S. and Afghan airstrikes over the past 3 years. From 2017 through 2019, civilian deaths due to U.S. and allied forces airstrikes in Afghanistan dramatically increased, the report says. It added that the number of civilians killed by international airstrikes increased about 330% from 2016. The last full year of the Obama administration to 2019, the most recent year for which there is a complete data from the United Nations. The number of non-combatant deaths also increased due to airstrikes from the Afghan Air Force, which the report said was due to increased leverage in peace talks with the Taliban. So in other words, they were looking at civilians, the Afghan civilians, as pawns. So between July and September 2020 alone, the Afghan Air Force killed 86 civilians and injured an additional 103 through the use of airstrikes, the report said. The author of the report, Netta Crawford, told Middle East Eye that she could not say what proportion of these airstrikes were from drones or manned aircraft. Still, the Bureau of Investigative Journalism said it believed most airstrikes in the country came from drones. In September, the Brown University project published a report that said at least 37 million people had been displaced as a result of U.S. war on terror, quote unquote. Civilians as political pawns, just like I was mentioning, this is how the U.S. establishment, the military-industrial complex, and all these other rich elites that make a profit from these wars see civilians in other countries. The treason of the high number of civilians being killed in these airstrikes stemmed from a move by the Trump administration that relaxed the restrictions on aerial warfare. When the United States tightens its rules of engagement and restricts airstrikes where civilians are at risk, civilian casualties tend to go down, the report said. When it loosens the restrictions, civilians are injured and killed in greater numbers. Sahar Gumkar, a researcher in criminology at the University of Melbourne, Australia, said that that the rise in civilian casualties in Afghanistan was largely seen by the U.S. and its allies as collateral damage on political pawns to create a leg up against the Taliban. Even while the civilian death toll increases, human security and Afghan self-determination has never been the objective of this war, Gumkar told Middle East Eye. I think what the civilian death toll also shows is how much we've normalized violence in some parts of the world where it's even thinkable to do politics through political violence. Absolutely disgusting. You shouldn't be playing with people's lives, and that is what they're doing here. In the respect, the U.S. and its allies are responsible for the majority of the political violence in the country. And the report was mentioning how the U.S. was training a lot of the people in the Afghan Air Force. Trump's drone warfare in the Middle East. Former President Barack Obama was heavily criticized for his use of drone strikes, which were 10 times higher than his predecessor, George W. Bush. Because of this, along with Trump's announcements of troop withdrawal from Syria, Afghanistan, Somalia, and Iraq, supporters of the current president have stated that he has done more to put an end to the forever wars in the Middle East. Yet the report from Brown University shows that under Trump, there has been an escalation in warfare through the use of airstrikes, including from drones, and they had led to an increase in civilian deaths in Afghanistan. In Trump's first year of office, his administration eased 2 restrictions of drone strikes, removing the limitation that only allowed strikes on high-ranking militants and removing the previous vetting process for drone strikes. The U.S. also relaxed a restriction of its rules of engagement so that it no longer had to be in direct contact with enemy forces to conduct airstrikes. The consequences of the relaxed rules on engagement were immediate, the cost of war projects report said. This trend exists across the Middle East as well, with the U.S. repeatedly using drone strikes in Iraq, Syria, Somalia, and Yemen. In 2017, drone strikes in Yemen increased by 300% from the previous year, according to the data compiled by Bureau of Investigative Journalism. The number of drone strikes in Somalia also increased significantly under Trump. Yemen, which the U.S. media, the mainstream media, never talks about, and even in some independent media, it barely talks about. Yemen is suffering so much right now, and the U.S. is arming Saudi Arabia to continue that abuse that they're doing in Yemen. They're sanctioning that country as well. On top of the pandemic that they're dealing with, they're also dealing with an epidemic of cholera. Meanwhile, okay. Still, the full picture of these attacks is not clear. In March, the U.S. Central Command stopped publishing monthly summaries of its airstrikes in Afghanistan. Meanwhile, rights groups have criticized the U.S. States Africa Command, U.S. AFRICOM, for failing to properly record civilian deaths in airstrikes in Somalia. Air Wars, a UK-based war monitor, found that at least 86 civilians had been killed in Yemen in 2020 as a direct result of U.S. airstrikes. The U.S. has not declared a drone strike in Yemen since 2019. Biden's silence on drone strikes. So you think that just because Trump ramped up the drone strikes in these countries that Biden is going to make things better? Biden is just going to be a continuation of Trump, just like how Trump was a continuation of Obama. Because we only have one party. We have a party of war. We have a party of Wall Street. We have a party of the health insurance industries and all these corrupt elites. That's what we have a party of. And people who vote Democrat and people who vote Republican are stuck in this illusion that voting for one is better than the other, and not realizing that they have to be fighting both of these parties, both of them. So the article goes on to say, despite his many criticisms of Trump's foreign policy decisions, President-elect Joe Biden has remained silent on the issue of drone strikes. The president-elect has also picked Avril Haines, again, who we discussed in this channel as well, very extensively. He chose Avril Haines to lead Americans' intelligence agencies. Haines was one of the architects of Obama's drone policies. Haines is also a very strong advocate for censorship, so you can expect her to censor reports that expose U.S. war crimes. You can definitely expect that. They're gonna call it foreign propaganda, like Russian propaganda and stuff like that, and just censor it off the internet. The choice of Haines has been heavily criticized by the progressive wing of the Democratic Party and anti-war activists who have called for cabinet picks that do not have connections to U.S. defense contractors. Gumkar noted that no administration of the last 20 years has been held accountable in any way for this growing violence, including the Bush and Obama administrations, a sign that Trump may also not be held accountable, and Biden may continue similar policies when it comes to airstrikes and drone warfare. As long as Afghanistan has been perceived as the good war, quote unquote, is what Obama was saying. Oh, it's the smart war. There has been less urgency in observing the U.S. role there, Gumkar said. We have no business in these countries. The longer we stay, the more we exacerbate the situations there. So I don't understand why, other than Trump derangement syndrome, why outlets like the Common Dreams is saying in their report here by Brett Wilkins, he was pretty much in his article suggesting that we need to be more engaged in Afghanistan, loosening tensions there. There was an increase in airstrikes and tightening our engagement there will also increase airstrikes. And to add more to the warmongering of Donald Trump, look at what he did to Julian Assange for exposing truths about the war crimes that the U.S. commits. He went ahead and went on to torture him. and he's just a whistleblower. He was just a publisher. So Donald Trump, by absolutely no means was he anti-war. And we're going to continue to get war presidents the longer that we continue to not realize that there's no difference between these two corrupt parties. Thank you guys so much for watching. Like, share, and subscribe. Stay informed and stay conscious.